Welcome to the All Things Admin Tech Crash Course. My name is Julie Perrine. I'm the founder and CEO of All Things Admin, and we are delighted to have all of you joining us for today's presentation. The Admin Tech Crash Course is a technology-focused training program for busy professionals, and our goal with each session is to create a crash course on the relevant technology topics that you need to stay current on the technology and software that you're using each day so that you can ultimately be more productive and proficient in everything you do. Today's topic is Become a Microsoft Excel Formulas Pro, Part 2, presented by one of our favorite technology instructors, Donna Gilliland of Most Training. Donna's career began back when DOS was king of the computer operating systems for personal computers. Floppies were actually floppy, and the internet had just begun to explode. At that time in her career, there were no training companies. You either learned it on your own or you went back to school to learn it, and Donna did both. Donna's career in the corporate world started as an executive assistant. She worked in a programming department supporting a staff of programmers and the VP of IT, but that was just the beginning. Over time, she realized that she had an aptitude for learning software technologies and the ability to communicate to others in terms all could understand. And her love of helping people, business, and technology made a great fit for her future career and training. Today, Donna is an award-winning technology instructor, certified technology trainer, and the president of Most Training. Please join me in a warm virtual welcome for Donna Gilliland. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Julie. I am ready to roll for an hour helping everyone with more about formulas. And in a moment, you should see an Excel screen, so if everyone sees that. Now, in case you didn't read, the objectives, of course, we had a part 1, as Julie said. And part 1 was the writing of formulas, learning how to get the basic understanding of writing more in-depth formulas. Part 2 takes up with range names, what they are, how to create them, and then how to use them within a formula. And then in addition, we will also be working with data validation, how to use a formula in data validation. Now, if data validation is something that's an unfamiliar term, you will be very familiar by the time that we finish. So let's get started right away. I've brought up a spreadsheet to work with. And if you have a spreadsheet and you want to work with one, that's perfectly fine. Just know that if you're going to go back and forth between my screen and your screen, you will need the GoToWebinar blue flower that's parked in your status bar at the bottom. So let's get started. Looking at your screen, we want to start first with the name box, because the name box is one of the places where you can apply a range name. And I'll back up for a moment to clarify. A range name is a way for us to refer back to a cell or a range of cells by a name rather than by the cell address. For example, I might be summing up numbers, and our typical reference is the name of the cell. It might be equal sum, and within the parentheses we may have specified A2 colon A50, and that's the reference. Well, all spreadsheets have an A2 through A50, but if I will range name that specific area, A2 through A50 as our example, then I can use that name throughout all my spreadsheets, and Excel will know exactly which numbers it's supposed to pull from where, regardless of the spreadsheet that I'm in. So you're going to learn how to create them, and then you will also learn what is the difference between a range name that is globally specific or just spreadsheet specific. Now, if it sounds technical, it's really not. You're going to see how easy it is as we progress. And we're going to start the quick way using the name box, and then we'll get into how you need to do this from the formulas ribbon. So here's what you're looking for. The name box is the box that is to the left of the formula bar. So if you get focused on the formula bar here, and I will turn on my spotlight here. So here's the spotlight, here's the formula bar, and to the far left you have a box called the name box, which is the box that always tells us what active cell that we are in when we are working within Excel. But it actually has multiple uses. One use is if you clicked in that box and you type the cell reference, such as G20 and you press the enter key, you would go to G20. But its other use is for either creating range names or getting a list of range names you've already created and then using those range names to navigate from sheet to specific areas within that sheet. So let's get started. All right, let me turn off the spotlight for us. And I'll start with us creating our first range name. For example, in this spreadsheet, I'll make it larger for us. In this spreadsheet, it is a spreadsheet of employees who work in different offices throughout this particular company. And they are working on a travel campaign where they are selling flights to different locations. So this workbook is tracking the sales of each salesperson and where they sold flights to and how many tickets they sold and for how much and whether or not they're commissioned. So in this case, if I wanted to range name this area where all the numbers are for the amount, any cell or cells that you want to range name, you have to select them. Now in my case, I want all these numbers in this column because later I'm going to use the range name in a formula within another spreadsheet, although you could use it in the same spreadsheet as well. So I'm going to quickly select these items, which I just did with Control-Shift down so I didn't have to drag. So that's your step number one in range naming. Select the cell or cells to be named. Then in the name box, you need to click in the name box. Now mine says ticket price only because it recognizes, Excel does, that I had previously range named this area. But yours probably still says A1. And I'm going to put in flight price. And keep this in mind about naming. Some more things for you to keep in mind, and they are defined, stated rather, in your handout that you will be getting on range names. So before I go further, know this about naming ranges. Number one, you can't have any spaces in a name that you create. Number two, you cannot start the name of a range with the reference to a cell. In other words, I couldn't name my range D3. So you can't do that. Number three, your range name can be quite lengthy. It can be up to 255 characters in length. So know those three things about the actual naming of the range. So now the next part is this. We've already selected the range. Number two, I have activated the name box and typed in the name that I want. Step number three at this point would be pressing the enter key so that the name is now created. And I'll press enter. And now in the future, that range that you're looking at, which I believe is the F2, there's probably F200 in here, it's now known as flight price. And I can go to any spreadsheet now and that be available. So let's try it out. I'm going to another sheet, an empty sheet. I'll get rid of what's there. Now, I'm in another sheet, but I'm in the same workbook, and going back to the name box, which says A1 because that's the active cell of the sheet I'm in. When you click the down arrow for the name box, if you have named any ranges, you will see the list that you have created. And I have one for flight price, the one I just created, and then I have two others I had previously created. Now, when you click the range name, Excel will take you back to the sheet and the range that applies to within that sheet. And I'm going to go ahead and click flight price. And I'm not in that sheet where I named it, but I will be after I click flight price. And look, I'm back in the sheet called promotion sales, and Excel has selected that entire range. And in a moment, we'll get into using them in a formula, but before I do that, I want to make some more clarifications for you. When you create a range name the way that you just saw demonstrated, which is using the name box, you need to know that the range name has been created to be available globally throughout the workbook. And that would mean that if you had 5, 10 sheets in the same workbook, that you could use that name, flight price, anywhere in the workbook on any sheet, because this method is a global reference. Now in a moment you're going to learn, what if though I have a name I want to use for a range, but I want to use that name in different sheets. There is a way for you to be able to use the same name in different sheets that refer to different sets of data, and we will be getting into that. But your main point right now is remembering that this method of naming makes it a global reference available to any sheet. So I can now do a formula with this range name referring to these amounts without having to be in this sheet. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to another sheet. And in this sheet, I'm going to create a formula that averages out, for example, what the average amount is that a ticket was sold for, an average amount of all these ticket sales that are going on for these various destinations. So here I am in a different sheet, and I'm just going to put average ticket sale. And without that range name, and you needed to create a formula, you would have to, of course, always start with an equal sign, because formulas start with an equal. And when you type that equal sign, in order to say do a sum, of course I need to get the formula going, you would have to click back on the sheet tab that has the numbers. You would then have to select the numbers that you wanted and cap with a closed parentheses and press enter. But not now, because I have a range name, and I'll start typing. So here we go. We called it ticket price. And now when you start typing the information after the open paren, Excel brings up the auto list of functions and range names. So anything that's a range name has a yellow tag on it, and that's what my ticket price here has in the auto list, is the yellow tag. Now I had created one called flight price a moment ago. I'm going to go ahead and choose my ticket price, double clicking, and then I will close with a closed parentheses. And then when I press the enter key, actually I want to do an average, not a sum. Let me change my function. And by the way, in case you don't remember from part 1, or maybe you didn't come to part 1 and you just decided to dive into part 2, when you are typing function names in Excel, it is not case sensitive. You can go either way, upper or lower, just so long as it's spelled right. And we're pressing the enter key. Excel comes back and tells me that this is the average ticket price, the average price. And I'm going to the number group here to bring down the number of decimal placements. So in the number group, you have 2 000 buttons, and these are for increasing and decreasing decimals. With each click of the second button here, I'll decrease my decimals. All right. So that's your first look at creating a range name, and that is by highlighting what you want and then going to the name box and typing what that name should be. And if you double click in the name box, it activates it, it turns blue, and you know you've got that selected so that you can type a name for the range. And at that point, it would be a matter of, it would be very repetitive. You would be going throughout and selecting to create the range names. Now here's another way to create range names. You can utilize the column and row headings of a spreadsheet to name the data by the name of the column title or the row title. For example, I have here amount, tickets, and total. They are all numbers, and I want to range name every one of those sets of numbers, but I want to do it in the quickest way, and I want to make use of the names of the headings in the process. And this is how you would do it. You would select all the heading names and the information that goes with those heading names. So see, I've got 3 columns selected now, and I started with the headings. This is how you can make use of the titles. Going to the formulas ribbon, and that's where we will be a lot, back and forth between home and formulas. On the formulas ribbon, there is a group of tools that says Define Names. There is a Name Manager button, a Define Name option, Use in Formula, Create from Selection. Now the Create from Selection will automatically generate names for my selected area based upon the headings that I included in the selection. By choosing Create from Selection, Excel prompts us, and the prompt is create names from values in the top row. Well, that is right. I want to grab the labels from the top row and use those as names for the values that reside beneath each of those labels. So in a few little steps, I wind up with 3 range names very easily. All I have to do at this point is click on OK, so that each one of these columns gets a range name by their heading. So let's see if that's the case. Going back to the range name box and clicking the down arrow, there it is. Look, we've got amount, we've got tickets, and we've got total. Those are the names of those headings. So now I will click tickets, and then Excel goes ahead and highlights all the numbers that have to do with tickets. Back to the name box again, down arrow, and I'm going to choose amount, and Excel selects the associated numbers. That's a lot easier than selecting the range, clicking in the name box, typing a name, pressing the enter key, but that's great if you are good with using the heading names you already have. Now, if I'd had any row titles, which I don't, but if I did and I had selected row titles and all the information to the right, there is an option where after you select Create from Selection, there is an option that says left column. I'll deselect top row, and it would take whatever your leftmost column is as the label for the information that resides to the right. Very handy. And while you and I are going to be using this in formulas, I want you to think in terms of these other ways that range names can be beneficial for you. Here is value number 1. If you are working in a large workbook that has many spreadsheets and you are having to go back and forth between data in these sheets within your workbook, and you're having to scroll and scroll to get down to a specific area that you are always analyzing, there's a lot of lost productivity in doing that. So the range names would give you a way to get back and forth. So I'm going to go to a different sheet here. Different sheet. Now, on this different sheet, let's see here on the office list, going to the name box as the way to go back and forth. Name box, down arrow. I'm going to choose amount, and then I'm taken to the promotion cell sheet, and Excel goes ahead and highlights what's there. Here's the second value above and beyond the use in formulas, is that remember that in Microsoft Excel, when you have a range highlighted, that when you go to print, there is an option to print what you have selected. So you could also use range naming to range name different blocks of information within your spreadsheet that you regularly print. That would keep you from having to pre-select and then choose to print the selection. You could just have pre-built range names for every area of the spreadsheet that you usually select and then choose print. Now, if you're unfamiliar, just a sidestep for a moment, when something's selected, when you go to the File tab and you choose Print, you can see that you've got options for printing under the Settings, and under the Settings for Print Active Sheets, which is default, down below is the option to Print Selection, which is going to print whatever you have highlighted. So certainly conveniences in that way, just traveling back and forth, and also for printing. but we're going to use ours primarily in formulas and then in data validation. All right, so let's go forward. Now that's one way. You've been on the name method. So what happens if you, one, need to modify the name of a range? Because for one, this cell spreadsheet, it goes down to row 200. Now I might add 100 more records in this sales campaign that's going on, and I've already named these ranges for the amount, tickets, and total. So how do you go back and modify the range? That comes from the formulas ribbon. And again, in the formulas ribbon, we are staying focused on the defined names group. And there is a big button that says Name Manager. When you click Name Manager, a dialog box appears to show you every single range name that you have created in this workbook or that somebody else may have created. From this list, you are able to modify the range name. For example, here on flight price, I'm going to click, and after clicking, down at the bottom, the refers to, it's a very small print here, refers to, tells me that this range refers to a sheet called Promotion Sales, and specifically a range within that sheet that's F2 through F200. So if I had added 100 more records and it was at row 300, then you can modify inside this box to edit it. You can also click the Edit button at the top, and when you click the Edit button at the top, you're also able to rename the range as well as the range it's referring to. Now notice that the scope, which I haven't explained, but it's coming, is dimmed out. More about that coming. So right now, your primary focus at this part is how to get back to the list of all the range names so that you can edit it, We'll go ahead and close. So far we've covered create from selection when we had pre-selected a range when we chose create from selection. But we haven't used the option that says define name. We haven't used that one. We're about to. All right, so now let's change focus for a moment in terms of the range name being globally available to every single sheet. These are our range names: amount, flight, price, office, etc. Now let's say that you have another price sheet and you want to, within that spreadsheet, in the same workbook, you want to use the same name again, ticket price, but you want ticket price to refer to a different area in this other spreadsheet. Well, as it currently stands, because the naming was done through the name box, that automatically made it globally available, which means you cannot use it twice. But if you need to use a range name more than once throughout the workbook, this is the procedure you have to take. It cannot be the name box. So let's use a different one here. I'm going to go ahead and eliminate one of these range names real quick in the name manager. I'm going to eliminate the tickets by clicking delete. And while I'm doing this, keep this, because this is part of your instruction as well. If you delete a range name and you've used that range name in a formula somewhere in your workbook, it will generate an error message because it's looking for the range name, and if it's been deleted, then the formula won't work. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this one, tickets. Right, so now here is the goal. I want to range name this range of numbers using the name tickets, but I want to be able to use that same name in other sheets within this workbook. So this is what would be necessary. Step one, in any situation, whether global or workbook specific, either way, you've got to select what you plan to name. So I'm selecting all these numbers, and then here in the Define Names group, I'm going to choose the option Define Name, and then that gives me a box. Now when the box pops up, Excel is assuming that I want to use the name that is one cell above the range that I've selected, and that works for me, but certainly I could change it. Now here's where you want to look closely. Excel assumes, just like it does when you name from the name box, it assumes that you would like the scope of availability to be workbook wide, which I've already explained. I can go to any spreadsheet and use tickets, and it'll know which sheet to go back to and which range of cells to pull. So now, if that's not what I want, then from here I will change the scope by clicking the down arrow for workbook, and what it will do is show me a list of all the sheets in this workbook that I have. So I'm going to choose that I want tickets to be only relative at this point in time to the sheet called promotion sales. Down below is a comment box where you can type a descriptive comment, and it's really for your benefit and no one else's in particular, unless you share a workbook with someone and you need to describe what the purpose of this range name is for. So that's what that box is for. Now at the bottom it shows me the range that I've already selected, and I have specified that it be relative to just the sheet promotion sales, and the range name is tickets. I click OK, and now I'm going to go to another sheet. I'm not in promotion sales at this point, but I'm going back to the name box and click the down arrow. And the down arrow is showing me all range names that I can work with relative to this sheet or throughout. And as you can see, tickets is not in the list because I'm not in promotion sales, and I chose to make it workbook specific. And that's how you can use the same name but in different sheets by starting with selecting the range first and then using the option here in define names that says define name. So even if you're not using it for formulas, I'm hopeful that in some of the ways I've described to you that you would find value at some level. All right, so let's take it to another level, if you will. We are going to create a data validated column, and then we're going to use a range name to populate the contents of that drop-down list. For example, here are all these offices in this list. Let me make an alteration real quick, and then we'll start this. I'm just clearing what's already here so you can see how it works from the beginning. All right, now data validation, if that's a new concept for you, and of course we're using data validation to marry with the creating of a formula using a validated range, but maybe data validation isn't familiar, so let me give you a brief explanation. The goal here is that in the future, when I am in any cell for these offices, I would like to have a drop-down list in alphabetical order of all the offices that are in the organization so I don't have to type. And that's something you might want to do for the U.S. states if you work with those a lot, whatever it is, or the names of employees, anything that you can minimize your typing and include it in a list, a drop-down list. Now, what I've done is on another spreadsheet, I have created a list of all the offices, and they're all in alphabetical order. But back in promotion sales, those offices, they are mentioned multiple times. Duluth is in there multiple times. Brooklyn Center is in multiple because it's different employees that are reporting on their sales. But I just need the drop-down list to have one reference to the offices that are within this corporation. So that I came off to another sheet, and I went ahead and created this for us, and I've got it in alphabetical order. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to range name this list office, and then through data validation we will use a formula that refers to that range called office, and that formula will pull this list into our drop-down list. Now, if that's sounding technical, it's going to be easy, easy, easy. You'll see. Well, you already know how to name a range quickly. You know, you can use the column heading, as we talked about before, rather than having to pre-select and then click in the name box and type a name. And let me make one adjustment. I'm going to the formulas ribbon, to the name manager, and I'm going to go ahead and delete what's already there so you can see it's created from the beginning. Starting with A1 and going through A19. And here's a tip for you while I'm doing this. If you think in this situation you were going to be adding locations to the company, and there were going to be another 5 locations added over time, and you want them to be in that drop-down list, even though you don't have those location names yet, you could still include the blank rows that the locations would be put into, is what you could do. Reselect this again. Right, so I could include the blank rows, and here's why. These are more power tips for you, really, is what this is before we continue. The reason why I'm selecting through 25 is knowing that the company's saying we're adding that many more locations, but I don't know the names of them yet. So if I range name that area to include those blanks, then when I do add those other locations, they will be part of my drop-down list. And second, I can come back in here and just click to alphabetize the list, and it will in turn be alphabetized in my drop-down list. I'll show you how it works in a moment. All right, so here's what I'm doing. I'm choosing the column name because that is the name I want to use, Office, and I am selecting all the way through row 25 in anticipation of growth. And now I'm ready to name it. I am still on the Formulas ribbon, and in the Define Names, I do want to define, actually I want to create from selection so that I'm prompted to use the top row label for this range, which is exactly what I want. And I'm going to click on OK, and now this whole area is named Office. The whole area is named Office. So the next part is, how would you use this range called Office to populate a drop-down list? So the first thing is learning about the data validation piece. I'm going to select, as you would too at work, I'm going to select the range of cells that I know I want to have a drop-down list in the future. Now, I just got off the phone with someone before our webinar, on another webinar, where they were creating their spreadsheet from a shell, so that we didn't have any entries yet, but we set up a template, and we went ahead and selected the full blank area that we knew we'd be doing data entry in to put in all the names of the employees that they want to choose from. Now, in my case, I've already got data here, but I'm going to select all these cells. Of course, at work, you'd be selecting all the blank cells and all the blank rows that you needed. And I could even come on down and choose further in anticipation of adding more records here. All right, so the number one step really for you to remember is when you are data validating a range, you must select the range that you're data validating. And to back up one, I do want to say this. Anything that we type in Excel allows us to type anything, a number, a value, a text, and you know that. But when you use data validation, what you're doing with that feature is you are restricting what can be placed in a cell or a range of cells. And there are multiple data validation type restrictions that can be applied. So I've got it selected, and this will come from the data ribbon, which we haven't worked with today. So the data ribbon. Once you get to the data ribbon, you've got your information selected. What you're looking for is in the group on the right-hand side. There's an outline group. In the outline group, you have a data tools group. You have a data validation button. So the range is selected, step number 1. Data validation button is step number 2. And then choose data validation. When data validation appears, it has 3 tabs: settings, input message, and an error alert. The settings is set to any value, which is what I was talking about moments ago. We can key in any value we like unless you restrict it. We are about to restrict this selected range to a list. When I click the down arrow for any value, here's my option to do a list. Now, when you choose a list, you receive another field that says source. Now, if it weren't for what you and I are about to do, which is making use of that range name to populate the list, and I wanted those offices in here, for one, it has no way for you to alphabetize the list if you're just typing it in yourself. So I would have to have it in alphabetical order in my head and begin typing the list. So I would type and put in a comma. Type and put in a comma. That is so unproductive. But the range name takes care of that. So we have a range name to bring in the office. Now, because it's a range name, in the source box, it is a formula that you're creating, and it's a very simple formula. And remember that all formulas start with an equal, and I type an equal, and then I have to type the name of the range I want it to work with, which I believe I named office. No spaces, just like with any formula. Equal office, and click on OK, and then any cell I go to in this pre-selected list that I validated, there will be a drop-down arrow. And when I click the drop-down arrow, there's my full list of offices, my full list, which is great. Now I'm going to go back to that sheet that has the office list. And just remember this, if I were to add more offices, which I'm about to do, and I added it at the bottom, I'm going to put in Birmingham as an office, Tuscaloosa. Let's see, Houston, you get the idea. Well, I added these at the end, and they're not in alphabetical order with the others. No problem. While in the list, from the data ribbon, one way of two ways for you to alphabetize, I will click the AZ button, and now they're all in alphabetical order, and Birmingham is at the top, and on down Tuscaloosa is in the appropriate place. Now if I go back to my promotion cells and I'm ready to key in another office, clicking the down arrow, scrolling up, Birmingham is at the top, because I had compensated for the fact that we may have more offices added, so we range named an area including blank areas, and we're all good to go. So when you're designing anything in a spreadsheet, think long range. Think long range. So we just used a range name in a formula in data validation to pick up these names for us. Now what I do is I like to, when I do what you just saw where I'm using another spreadsheet to house the information that I want to pull in data validation, I always hide that sheet because it's a sheet that's just not necessary to be viewed. It's being used behind the scenes. I'm not doing any data entry in it. And if you right-click a sheet tab, as I'm doing, I'm right-clicking Office List. I'm going to choose Hide from the Action List, and now I don't see any reference to that list, no reference whatsoever. In the future, when I need to modify that list because I'm going to add more offices, then right-click the tab, and you have Unhide as a choice, and then a list will appear showing any sheets that you have hidden, and then you would choose the one that you wanted to unhide, and there may be even more than one you want to unhide. So I hope this is going well for you so far, because I'm going to keep going. All right. Now remember that we have a formula here for ticket price. Now watch what happens going back to the Formulas tab, because that's where your options are for name, the Name Manager. From the Name Manager button, I'm going to choose Name Manager. Let's see, yeah, ticket price. Choosing ticket price, have a button at the top for delete. After choosing delete, we're being asked if we're sure we want to delete the name ticket price. I click OK, I click close, and look, this is the error message that you would get, pound name question mark, if you deleted a range name that a spreadsheet was using in a formula. So be careful with that. And let me go ahead and reverse this. And then a power tip for you: if you have inherited someone's spreadsheet and you wanted to see where there are formulas, because formulas would also show the names of ranges that had been used, when you press Control as the tilde, which is the key to the left of the number 1, it will then display everywhere that there is a formula in your spreadsheet. And if any of those formulas were using range names, you would see it written in the formula, is what you would see. All right, so now you can turn this on and off also, you know, from the ribbon too, if you don't like the keyboard shortcuts. But Control and the tilde again will suppress all the formulas, and I will just see the values from those formulas. All right, so now let's try out a formula called COUNTIF, which is a statistical formula, and we're going to use it to find how many times the word yes appears in range I1 through I200. But I want to create that formula in a different spreadsheet, and the convenient way would be for me to range name this area and then make use of it in the formula. Now the first thing is I want to range name this area, and I am going to take advantage of the column heading, and by clicking in I1, so Control Shift down is just a quick way to get everything selected, and then back to the formulas ribbon, and then I'm going to choose Create from Selection. Excel wants to know if I want to use that top row label. I do. Right, so I've got the range name created, and that served as a nice review for you. And I want to create a formula that will come back and tell me how many sales records here we had a commission, and how many sales records we didn't have a commission. So that would be 2 formulas. And this formula is a COUNTIF. I'm going to name this sheet COUNTIF. Just a double click on the tab and I can rename, and I will create a formula with that. I want to know the total yes on commission, total no, just inserting your row here. Now what I'm doing at the moment has nothing to do with the range names, just aesthetics. All right, so here we go. So the function COUNTIF is a statistical function, and I am in another sheet that will be pulling from the promotion sales. I want to know how many times the word yes appears. So in this function, equal COUNTIF, keep this in mind, more of a refresher for you if you took part 1. As soon as you type the letter of a function right after the equal, Excel pops up with an auto list, and I can see COUNTIF in the list. Now I will double click, and by way of reminder from the first class, don't forget that when that open paren is typed, that is when Excel will pop up and give you information about what should come first, second, third, whatever the case might be. In this case, this formula only has 2 parameters. It has to know the range that you are looking in and what you are looking for, thus the option for criteria. And each is separated with a comma, or you separate with a comma from range to criteria. So the very first thing being bolded is range. Where is that range? Well, we named that range commission. So I start typing COMM, and the auto list engages. There's a yellow tag, and I know that is a range name, and that is the one I want. I'll choose it, and as you look back at the help of COUNTIF, it does show that a comma is needed before you can specify what you are looking for, the criteria. I want to know how many times the word yes occurred in that range, And since it is text, I need to put in an open quote and a closed quote. The word, the text, must be in open, close quotes, and then capped with a closed parentheses. So now this formula is going to search for my answer and add up the number of occurrences, all from another spreadsheet because of the convenience of a range name. When I press enter, it comes back to tell me that within that defined range, 102 records of the 200 are commissioned. And then I'll just pull that formula over using the autofill square. That's the black square in the lower right corner. I'll just copy it over. Now it's still going to say 102 because I haven't changed the criteria. I'll double click the cell, and the criteria this time is tell me how many records were set to no commission, and I'm just changing that part of it. Tells me 97. Here's the other thing about you using a range name that I haven't mentioned. A range name is an absolute cell reference, it is an absolute reference to an area. For example, the typical, or really I should say default. The default behavior of Microsoft Excel, as you learned in the first class, is to copy formulas in a relative way. For example, here in J1 of the promotion cells, I'm going to put commission cells, type equal, and I want to take the ticket amount and multiply an asterisk times the number of tickets this employee sold and press enter. Now when you look at the formula, it is F2 times G2, and by way of reminder, and this isn't new because you had this in the beginning, but it's speaking to the point of you using a range name and how it's an absolute reference. The formula as it stands, if you copy it down, it's going to become F2 G3 because F2 is the next employee amount and G3 is the next ticket amount, and that is what I want it to do on the way down. But if we're wanting it to also refer to a specific percentage, for example, they are commissioned at, let's say, 8%, and I've typed 8% in L1, and I come back to this formula, and I type in times again, and I put in L1. Keep this in mind about formulas as we progress. Excel calculates from left to right unless there's a math precedent to deal with. Right now, this is all multiplication. So there is no higher math in this formula. So I don't need any parentheses anywhere. So it will multiply F2 and G2 first and then by L1. But L1 has 8%. And if I leave this like it is and I copy down, then on the way down, L1 will become L2, L3, and there's nothing in L2, L3, so I would get a 0. Now, I know you learned that in the first one, but here is the point. If I don't do a dollar symbol, L$1, then 1 would increment. But I could also multiply it by a range name. I could have this 8% off in another spreadsheet, and I could name that one cell a name and then say times and whatever the name is. And it would be an absolute reference by virtue of the fact that it is a range name. So if I copied this down and I had multiplied, I don't have a range name for this one, but let's say I had range named L1 C amount for commission amount. Let's say I had done that and it was there. Then when I press enter, of course the first one would have been right anyway, but then when I copied it down, F2 would be F3, G2 would be G3 as it should be, but the cell named C amount would always be that same cell referenced without me having to use dollar signs. I could even go to another spreadsheet like we discussed before and use that same name in a formula. So it is an absolute reference point to a cell or a range of cells that you have applied it to. So hopefully that helps you. And if you are studying for your certification in Excel, you can certainly bank on the fact that you will have formulas on your certification exam, and you will be expected to know how to create and use range names. So this is going to be a very good video for you to go back and review when the time comes that you have to do this on a certification exam. All right, let's see if I've got enough time to do maybe one more. We have about 5 minutes left. Let's see here. I think we do. All right, I think we do. I'm going to open up another file for this. If I can find it quickly. I hope you've learned some new things. That's always good. All right. Having to choose wisely since you only have 6 minutes. I don't think I can do VLOOKUP in 6 minutes with you, so I'll use the payment. Yeah, let me see. I don't know. Maybe we can. Maybe we can. Yeah, I think I can make it. See if I can beat my record. All right, VLOOKUP is a lookup function. And VLOOKUP is used to look up information from a spreadsheet and pull information sometimes into another spreadsheet. And VLOOKUP, part of the formula, requires that you specify where all the data is that the VLOOKUP is to look within. For example, in this case, I'm going to consider this my master list. I'm going to be looking up customers based upon a customer number. I'm going to go ahead and alphabetize this. And I do have a video on this on my YouTube channel, Most Training, too, if you want to go back and review it. But you also have the video here from Julie that you can review. Okay, let's see. All right. And I am going to range name this area. Notice that I'm using the column headings, formulas ribbon, create from selection, and I do want just the top row of labels to range name. You know what? Let me back up for a moment. I actually don't want to use these. Here's why. VLOOKUP needs to know the complete range that your data is in that you're trying to look up. So that entire range here is A1 through J23. So I'm going to have to give that whole area its own name is what I'm going to have to do. So now that I've got the entire area selected, I will go to the name box and click, and I'm going to call this one M list, as in master list. And remember that I have to press the enter key to name it. And then I will do a VLOOKUP formula in another spreadsheet. I'll just do one run of it because of time. And what I'm doing is I'm copying these labels to my other sheet so that I know what all the headings are. All right, now here's what I want to know. I want to be able to look up information about client 2, client 3, and client 5. And I want to know what is the first name of this client. Well, with a VLOOKUP, equal VLOOKUP, notice that after I get the lookup name in, open paren, here's the help. Excel is saying, where's your lookup value? What are you looking up? Well, I'm looking up client number 2. So I'm clicking this cell where I've typed the number 2. And keep in mind, my spreadsheet's laid out just like my master list is. So I put that, okay, I want you to look up client number 2, and then a comma. and then Excel bolds table array. All Excel wants to know is, okay, where is that table that's got everything in it where I can find client number 2? Well, I named that whole range M list, so it knows that that list is back on the sheet I started with. And then a comma, and then with VLOOKUP, it works on column index numbers, and I'll try to make that an abbreviated explanation. Column A, when you're doing VLOOKUP, column A is considered number 1 in the index. Column B is considered number 2 in the index. So now, Excel wants to know, all right, I'm going to look up that number you say, and you're looking up their first name, so tell me what column their first name is in. Numerically speaking, they're in column index 2. That's why I copied the headings over, so it'd be an exact match to the master, and I could just read from this sheet and go, oh, column B. Yeah, column B is 2 in the index, so I would type in a 2. And then the next thing is a comma, and Excel wants to know, do you want to specify true or false? Very important about VLOOKUP. You want to choose false because you want Excel to look for an exact match. What if there was no client number 2? Or what if it was Social Security numbers you were looking up and you mistyped the Social Security number? Without the false parameter, Excel is going to pull the next closest number to that, and you would never be told that it didn't exist. So I'm going to cap with a closed paren and press enter. Comes back and tells me that this client, his name is Gerald. Now the formula could then be modified, and I could copy it over and think about this for a second. If you copy the formula over, remember about relative referencing. It's currently saying that it is looking up the index number in cell A3. And remember, when you copy across, Excel changes column letters. And I don't want it to remove its focus from A3. Now, if you were to copy down, A3 would become A4, and I want that to happen because I want to pick up the next customer. So you would need to place a dollar symbol in front of the A so that Excel, when copied across, it would not become B3, etc. And if I copy across, the reason why it tells me Gerald is because that 2 is a static number, and I would have to open the formula and put in a 3 so it would know that it should pull from column 3, the last name, and I see that the customer's name is Gerald Lincoln. Now there is a power way to not have to key in those static numbers, but you'll find that in the video. And that is a wrap. We are at 1 o'clock up and down, and I am hopeful that you have learned a lot. So I'd like to open up for Q&A and see what you have to ask. So let me open up the question box and see what we've got going. All right, questions. Here we go. I'll delete the ones that are there. Let's see. Looks like, all right, let's see. So did you learn so much you don't have questions? And if you have a question, you can do so by entering your question on the question box in the GoToWebinar screen. Or if you don't have questions right now, but you need to get back to your desk and give some of these things that you learned today a try, you can always connect with me online or through my website at mosttraining.com, 1 T in the name. So let me just take one look and see if there are any questions. Well, did you learn anything? Anything new? All right, well then let me close that box and get back to the slide deck here for a few things. And that is contact information. The upper half of your slide is how you can contact Julie Perrine, all her different ways that you can contact her. And then how you can contact me as well. So the upper half is for Julie, lower half is for me. And as we close out, I do want to say this. As with any crash course, our goal today was to arm you with the tools and strategies you need to take back to your computer, to your office, your projects, to implement what you learn. But it does require you to be committed to the implementation process. So Julie and I encourage you to find ways to implement what you've learned today and then share it with other colleagues. Review it as quickly as you can. That's the best way to ingrain what you have learned today in your permanent memory, so you'll be able to use it when the time comes and when you really have to have it. So we want to thank each of you for investing your time and energy to join us for this presentation. And that concludes our webinar. Thanks again for participating. We so look forward to seeing you in class again soon.